Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Tuesday. It is September 28th, 2021. My name is Chrissy McCullough with Empowered Family Law PC. Thanks everyone for joining today. We may have people come in and out. If you have any questions, please raise your hand or type them in the chat. I certainly don't mind stopping along the way to answer any questions that anybody might have. So this is 10 critical mistakes to avoid before filing for divorce. And this could be hours long. If you're here, it's because you have questions involving divorce, or perhaps you're thinking about divorce. And so these are just some general guidelines based on what I have seen that might help you when you're thinking about filing for divorce. Again, please feel free to ask any questions along the way. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see the screen? Okay. All right, good. So this is, as I said, 10 critical mistakes to avoid before filing for divorce. Here is my information. That is my name. You can call me Chrissy though. This is our phone number, and this is our website for Empowered Family Law, if you want to check us out. All right, let's get into it. Mistake number one: friends, family, and Google. So first of all, a lot of people want to say, well, my sister's divorced, this happened, or I have a friend where the judge did X, Y, and Z. And I have no doubt that there are cases where some unusual things have happened. I've had cases like that. But you need to be really careful about relying on advice from friends and family when it comes to your divorce. I've had some clients get some really bad advice from friends and family that is clearly coming from a good place, right? These people care about you. You want to go to them for support, but taking their advice before consulting with a lawyer about the correct way to handle things is a big mistake, and it can cost you. It can cost you money. It could cost you some time with your kids. It could cost you a lot. So I cannot caution you enough. Do not mistake friends and family for legal experts. That leads into what your support team really looks like for you. You need trusted support when you're going through a divorce. There's a big difference, though, between your emotional support team and your professional support team. Let your friends sit on the porch with you and have a cup of coffee and talk about how upsetting and draining this is, because it really is. Let your mother help you out with your kids. That's the emotional support you need. But you also need a team of professionals who are going to support you in a different way. So you need a family lawyer. You most likely need a counselor. You may need some other professional support with financial planning, which we'll get to more later. But notice the difference and respect the difference early on in your divorce. Misinformation. This is where Google really comes into. Do not Google what age can a child choose to live with their parents? What should my child support be? all of that, it's very similar to having a medical condition and relying on the internet to diagnose you. There is so much false information out there that you don't want to get any information off the internet. As I said, every case is different. Your case may have nothing to do with the case you read about. Do research if you want to, but be very, very careful what your source is and what you're taking as gospel. All right, mistake number 2, not having a plan. The last thing you want to do is go into a divorce without knowing what your situation is that especially financially, that you may need to look into. So information and preparation is your best friend, your best defense, your best offense. You want to go ahead and have your tax records, any retirement information that you may be able to get about you and your spouse, bank statements. There may be other financial records that aren't contained in these categories. The more you can gather, the better your plan will be. If you can come into your appointment with your attorney holding these things in your hand, or better yet, having emailed them in advance, you can make a plan before you've ever filed the first thing with the court, before you've ever told your spouse that this is what you're going to do. And knowing what you're looking for and having a flexible plan, but still a plan in mind, is going to make a huge difference in your outcome. Are there any questions about this so far? Okay, all right. Mistake number 3, relying on your memory. Going through a divorce is traumatic. And you know what your body does? You know what your brain does when you're going through a traumatic event? It purposely makes you forget. That's a defense mechanism. That's a human response to trauma. You might think, oh gosh, there is no way I'm ever going to forget that these horrible things or these really upsetting things have happened. Guess what? You really will forget it, unless you take steps not to. Document, record, and secure information. Here's what I mean by that. If you have a significant thing occur, or something that might not seem significant at the time, but any kind of exchange with your spouse leading up to a divorce, especially if it's heated, you write that in a journal. You keep a timeline for yourself. If you are fighting with your spouse, hit record on your phone. You may not think it's important, but it might become important later. You might not realize it's important, but it may have significant importance to your attorney. So keep logs, keep recordings if you can, and then secure those. Do not keep them where anybody else can access them. Find some place, whether it's a friend or family member's house, whether it's maybe your office, but keep those things in a secure location so that you can access them later. Maybe you won't have to, but maybe you will. Calendars. I advise all of my clients, with children especially, where visitation is any type of issue or may become an issue, keep a calendar. If you can go back to a calendar, then if you have to defend some type of claim that your spouse has the children the majority of the time, if you can look back and say, well, no, for the past 6 months, I picked them up from school 4 out of 5 days every week, or 90% of the time when they had a doctor's appointment, I took them. Again, these are small things. Hopefully they'll remain small in your life. But if you're fighting over custody of your children in a divorce, they may be very important. So keep a calendar. Again, you need to secure that calendar in a place where nobody else can get to it besides you. And of course, your lawyer. Witnesses. There may be a time where you need witnesses to help you remember what happened, but more importantly, to testify about what might have happened between you and your spouse, between you and somebody else. So if an event occurs, you need to take note of anybody who may have been a witness to that. Again, so you're not relying on your memory or relying on your own recall of something. A good example of this is, unfortunately, sometimes at children's sporting events, there are altercations between parents, or something may happen with a parent that is notable. You need to just go ahead and jot down where you are keeping all of your secure records. Who was there and what did they see? And if you need to refer to it later, then you know who witnessed what. Mistake number 4, failing to make a budget. I cannot emphasize how important it is to get a grasp on your finances early. Maybe you never paid a bill in your life. Maybe your spouse took care of all of that. Maybe your spouse was the sole breadwinner and you haven't worked in 30 years. This goes back to my first point, which is that information is your friend. Because what are you going to do with that financial information? You're going to make yourself a budget. Status quo is a term that you're going to need to know, and your lawyer will explain this more to you. But boiled down, the status quo means that everybody should be paying essentially the same bills in the same manner that they were paid during the marriage. Nobody should be spending down big accounts or big assets that you might have. Nobody should be taking on enormous debts that you didn't have before. If you don't know what your budget was during the marriage, you're not going to know to tell your lawyer, hey, my spouse is violating the status quo. We need to do something about this. Alimony. If you have a case where you are asking for alimony or where your spouse is asking for alimony, there are certain things, certain factors that you and your lawyer are going to have to show the judge to prove whether or not you qualify for alimony or whether or not your spouse might qualify for alimony. One of those factors is your budget during the marriage and what your budget is going to look like after the marriage. If you don't have that, it may mean the difference between you getting alimony and not getting alimony. And that could be a huge factor in your post-divorce life. Your post-divorce needs. You need to start looking at, how am I going to live after this is over? Do I need to get my own health insurance? Will I need to get my own car insurance policy? What kind of housing needs do I have? Is there debt repayment that I think I'll be responsible for? The time to start estimating your post-divorce needs, it's not 30 days before trial. It's not a month into your case. The time to start looking at that is before you ever file for divorce. Don't let it sneak up on you. You may be looking at taking care of yourself and your children. Do you have children? There are lots of resources, if you don't know where to start, to help you start this kind of financial planning after your divorce is final. Any questions? Mistake number 5, involving the kids. Do not, and I can't say this enough, do not use your children to hurt your spouse. Not only will it hurt your kids, it will hurt you. Don't do it. Parental alienation is a real thing. What is parental alienation? It's where you intentionally either talk badly about or try to withhold time from, or in any way try to hurt the relationship between your children and the other parent. If you go to court and the court sees that you've engaged in parental alienation, it could make the difference between you getting custody of your children or not. Non-disparagement. What does that mean? Our courts in Mobile, Alabama, put what we call non-disparagement clauses in our orders. That says you do not speak ill of the other parent to your child. You don't speak ill around the other child, whether it's with a new step parent, whether it's with your family. If you need to say something bad about the other person, you wait until your child is not there. And finally, counseling support for the children. Sometimes it's really hard not to involve the children, particularly if you and your spouse are still living together during your divorce. Children are very intuitive. They pick up on energy. They hear things you say. You may really need some guidance on how to talk to them about the divorce that isn't perhaps unintentionally negative, alienating, and that gives your children the support that they need in your divorce case. Please reach out to the school counselors. Ask your attorney for references to counselors that specialize in children going through divorce, family counseling for divorce. These resources are out there. Get yourself into counseling or your children into counseling if you think that they are experiencing trauma from your divorce. Mistake number 6, making major life changes. Disposing of assets. I talked earlier about the status quo order. Some people make the mistake of thinking, well, I'm going to go ahead and cash in my retirement account before I file for divorce. And that way, I won't be violating the status quo, right? That's a mistake. If you already know and intend to file for divorce, you better consult with an attorney before you dispose of any major assets, because it may come back to bite you. The judges see this all the time. Remember that. Somebody cashes in their 401k and a month later files for divorce. Guess what? That was a marital asset. That may affect the division of assets. That may affect what a judge does. Get legal advice before you do something like that. Same thing goes with incurring debts. You might think, okay, I'm going to prepare for my separation. I'm going to go out and buy a house. I'm just going to go buy a house, put it in my name. I'll put the mortgage in my name, and therefore I'll be ready to move out for the divorce. Guess what? You just incurred a marital debt and obtained a marital asset that may be subject to division. You may go out and co-sign on a debt for your spouse, knowing that you intend to file for divorce, but your spouse doesn't know that. You're still liable on that debt. You need to get legal and probably financial advice before you do anything like that. Changing jobs. Now, sometimes that's unavoidable. You may lose your job. You may have no choice. But making a major job change could have a very significant impact. Even if it's just a schedule change, that might impact your children, might impact custody. If it's a big financial change, that could have a financial impact on the outcome of your divorce. So any major life change like this, you want to make sure you have consulted with an attorney before you do it. Mistake number 7, playing the field. Private investigators. If you are contemplating going through a divorce or you're in the midst of a divorce, you should assume that everything you do is being watched by somebody. If you wouldn't do it in front of a judge, you shouldn't do it. So just because you think your spouse might have a significant other already, that doesn't mean that you can prove it. But guess what? If you've got a private investigator following you and they can prove it on you, you're the guilty party. Dating apps. It is not a good idea to go ahead and create a dating profile, even though you may consider your marriage to be over, even though your spouse might tell you that they don't care. Somebody's going to notice you're on the dating app. Somebody who knows your spouse is probably going to notice it. And guess what? They're going to report it to the spouse, and your spouse is going to report it to their attorney. Resist the urge to do any type of online dating until your divorce is final. That leads me to the difference between being physically separated and being divorced. Alabama has a legal separation, but it's rarely used. You do not have to file for legal separation before you file for divorce. In fact, almost nobody does that. Just because you may have moved out and no longer live with your spouse, that doesn't mean you're divorced. You are not free to date other people until you are divorced. There is no, well, I was legally separated and I could date then. You may have a friend in another state who tells you that, legal separation. Okay, my attorney says we can date. Guess what? Go back to slide number 1, taking the advice of friends and family. It doesn't work like that here. You need to speak with your lawyer before you do anything like that. Mistake number 8, spilling the beans. You might have dirt on your spouse. That might be what led you to decide to file for divorce. You might have had an investigator on them or a friend who saw them with another person. Guess what? It's going to be really hard not to tell them that you know about that. Don't tell them. Alabama, we have a no-fault divorce cause of action, but we also have fault. Fault can be infidelity. It can be drug use. It can be physical abuse. It can very likely, it will very likely rather, affect the outcome of your case one way or another if you can prove fault. Therefore, you don't want to give the other side the opportunity to explain that if you have proof of it. That leads to the credibility of the other side and the timing of giving them that evidence. That's something your lawyer needs to decide. Credibility means, are they going to tell the truth about whether they did it or not? If they don't know that you know, imagine how different their story might be. The timing of it can make all the difference in the world. Save it for your lawyer. It is so frustrating as a lawyer to have some really important evidence, some really good information, and not really be able to use it because it's already been used. You need to help your lawyer help you, and don't make it difficult for them to do their job. Mistake number 9, this is so important. Failing to take care of yourself. You are going through a transition that is very similar to experiencing the death of a loved one. You are preparing for the death of a marriage. It's very painful, and your body is going to want to react in ways that might be damaging to you if you're not paying attention to it. So, drugs and alcohol. Maybe you've always been that person that has, one drink after work, and you're feeling stressed out and sad and lonely, and then it comes to 2 drinks, and then it's 3. And then guess what? There's evidence that, you're drinking a bottle of wine a night. You're feeling terrible. You don't even realize it. Be really careful with your use of any drugs or alcohol. You may have drugs prescribed to you. That's fine. Use them as prescribed. Do not turn to illegal drugs. None of this is actually going to help you or ease your pain, even though it may feel like that to begin with. Sleep. Sleep is a foundational need, as real as food and water. You've got to make sure you're getting enough sleep. Whether you're a night owl or an early riser, minimum needs to be 7 hours a night, and 8 if you can get it. This is more true during the divorce process, probably than any other time in your life. Exercise. Do not neglect your body's need for exercise. This can be a wonderful tool to really take care of your mental health. Go for a walk with a friend. Take up yoga. Just move and breathe. This can also be a really great outlet that you may discover during this time. You might take up hiking. You might take up going to the gym with a friend and get some companionship out of it too. And finally, nutrition. You're going to be exhausted. Even if you're sleeping enough, your body is going to be exhausted. So make sure you get enough nutrition. Don't stop and get fast food every day. Resist the urge to skip meals because you feel down. Take care of your body. And if you do that, it's going to be much easier to take care of yourself through the legal process of your divorce as well. Finally, mistake number 10, social media. That's right, I put an exclamation point there. Social media. Do not get sucked into social media during your divorce. Facebook I have as a friend and a foe. How's it a friend? Well, your spouse might not heed the advice to avoid Facebook. And you might through a friend or family member or some other way, you may come into possession of some Facebook posts that they do. Okay, that's how Facebook can be a friend. But mostly Facebook is a foe because you do not want to be posting things on Facebook. I will never forget a case I had during the beginning of my career where my client had been tagged at a location on Facebook that the client didn't even know about. And guess what? The client's paramour was there. The other side was able to prove that the client was out with a paramour because of Facebook. If that person hadn't been on Facebook, there would have been no proof. So as much as possible, as much as is possible for you, get off of Facebook. Snapchat and TikTok, these things have their own category. Snapchat is not anonymous. A lot of people seem to think that because it disappears, it may never resurface. I hope you all know there are ways to record that. I think you're notified if there's a screenshot taken, but who cares if you're notified? It's too late by the time that's happened. Don't think that you're safe sending things on Snapchat. You're not. The same goes with TikTok. Listen, I don't use TikTok. I've never had TikTok in my life. Have I had cases where people made videos of themselves on TikTok, singing along to maybe explicit songs or doing some really inappropriate things? Yes. Please, if you have things like that, take them down before you file for divorce and get off of these apps. Now, I understand there are some exceptions. I'm a businesswoman. I have a Facebook page. I'm not going through a divorce right now, but I have in my life. I use Facebook for my business, and you might too. And I'm not telling you that you need to remove all of that or not utilize any social media for business reasons, especially. Just be very, very careful. Be careful who your friends are and be careful what you do on there. Any questions about social media? As I mentioned, we are here to help you help yourself. Empowered family law only helps people through family law matters. We handle divorces, we handle child custody, we handle post-divorce matters. That's our phone number right there, 251-277-2885. Our website is empoweredfamilylaw.com. You can email us at info@empoweredfamilylaw.com if you want more information. We empower families to navigate difficult changes and create new beginnings. We want to empower you. I really appreciate you joining me today. I love talking about this process because I truly believe it can be a healing process. And if anyone has any questions at all, please don't hesitate to call or email me. I'm happy to answer your questions. Thanks for joining me.